It's the What Are You Driven By podcast, where we dive deep to see what motivates and drives our community's best leaders. Welcome back to the What Are You Driven By podcast, where we discover what drives our community's best leaders and how they engage their teams to achieve their potential. I'm your host, Diondra Filicetti, the author of the book Engagement Economics, and also a professional speaker and trainer. But more importantly, today I am joined by Lynsey Redman. Lynsey is a senior consultant, HR people analytics analyst at Intact Insurance, where she partners with HR leaders to transform workforce data into strategic, actionable insight. She specializes in workday analytics, dashboard development, and advancing best practices in people analytics to support data-driven decision-making. Welcome, Lynsey.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I know I have a few of those big words that come about with the whole people analytics title.
Absolutely. And you know what? Your bio is incredibly intriguing, and because of those big words, because we're going to want to know, what does this all mean for those in HR, for leaders? We're going to dive deep into that today. So maybe we'll get you to kind of introduce more about who you are and what you do at your company.
Yeah, definitely. So I've had a very not linear approach as to where I was coming from with this. So for me, just a quick background was I actually did a Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology, which is kind of ironic because you're thinking, how does science go with analytics? However, I minored in HR, got certified in HR, and then I worked actually for the university for 8 years in HR. So that's where the whole hands-on operational, you name it, I've seen and I've grown from other fellow leaders. And the biggest thing that I have ever saw from this was that I was able to do data analytics. And what really shaped me the most and what I do now at my role at Intact is I take data specifically from more of the HRIS systems, and I build stuff in the systems in order to actually gain the data they need. But this data is being used by the VPs in order to drive their strategic initiatives. So as we all know, COVID happened. And that's where this role in people analytics has really come about, because I would say probably like 5 to 10 years ago, this wasn't really a huge kind of analytic look at it. But because there was budget cuts, because people are now retiring, because they're hitting the baby boomer generation, all these corporations, that is what my main role with people analytics is within HR, is that we're analyzing the people of the company. So I'm not doing insurance necessarily at the insurance company, but I'm analyzing the people that work there. So that it's not also just negative things of, okay, people are a number, how can we make cuts? It's, okay, how can we motivate the people? Are we seeing that certain managers are actually having the highest engagement? Are we able to go and see, we have such a high reduction right now in the baby boomer population retiring, like a high number. And this is being seen all across different workforces. But the Gen Zs are now being introduced. And the fact that our Gen Z population is almost starting to even like get towards our millennial population. And it's like, how can we work with them? So you can tell there's so much that goes into what you could analyze or look at. And I'm very passionate about it.
Oh yeah. Like this
Obviously.
is fascinating stuff. And I think, you
Yeah.
know, for the most part, when people think about, like, I know you mentioned the engagement and motivation, and sometimes people
Yeah.
don't think about the numbers behind that. And when they think analytics is like, just like you mentioned, it's budget cuts, it's who's getting laid off,
Exactly.
but there's so
Yeah,
much more to it. So
absolutely.
in your experience, because you're with senior leadership helping make these
All the
decisions,
time.
what kind of decisions and what goes into, like, in your day to day, like what kind of decisions are being made that are more on the positive side that maybe the people don't think about?
Yeah, I think something that would be more on the positive side that I don't think about is kind of saying, where is it that we actually should be giving recognition? So, like, who are these VPs or these leaders or directors that are allowing for higher engagement in their actual employees? And then, as well, being able to see, okay, if we have a shifting workforce, one big thing is, how we kind of talk about like organizational culture and different stuff like that. Are we seeing that people are using the benefits as much as we're providing them? If we have exit surveys, what are they saying that we can actually use from what might be as seen as like a negative that they're leaving? How can we now adapt that and make it a positive? So we're providing feedback like maybe the hybrid's not working. We noticed that maybe 30–40% of the people that left in the last 2 months, they were stating that maybe promotion, lateral movements, they wanted more of this. So it's being able to, I think, take what people might see as somewhat not positive, but learning from it and growing from it. And that's a lot of what the analytics do within HR is taking this kind of unknown, not put together data, but being able to tell a story. And then it's
Mm.
interpreting that story as to, okay, this is what's happening. Now, how can we grow from it? So, yeah, there's a lot of different ways that it kind of has that positive impact.
Yeah, because, when everybody goes to work, they have their own perception of what that experience is. And so unless you're actually looking at the data
Yeah.
to paint that picture, tell the story, as you mentioned, it's hard to figure out like what's actually going on because one person's
Yeah.
anecdote is only their experience.
Yeah. And especially like our company now, after we had another company join us, we have about 24,000 employees.
Oh, wow.
So that's the amount of data that I'm analyzing. So when you grow to something that large of a company, sometimes you think, or you see companies that are like 30, 60 people, you're like, oh, I can just have a sit down and just get this information. It's like when you're dealing with large masses, and that's with a lot of companies now, like the huge corporations, they're trying to find this way. And this is why workforce analytics is becoming so big because they need to find these ways that you can connect with the actual people because you want to maintain them, not just from obviously like a human approach. Yeah, there is a cost effective. If people leave, the turnover, having to go and train people again, it's making sure that we're adapting our actually like company and corporation to meet their needs. But it's hard to do that when you have people all over the world. So this analytics is helping to kind of get that story when you can't just have that one-to-one conversation.
Yeah. So, okay. Wow.
I
Okay.
know it goes like that's what's crazy thing with like workforce analytics. It goes into so many, and anytime we talk with people about it, they're like, "Wait, what?" Because there's so many different approaches that you could go with it.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm like, okay, where do
I
we go
know.
with this next, right? So maybe I'll
Yeah.
ask, because people listening to this might be thinking, okay, like my company doesn't have that many people, so what do I
Yeah.
do? So maybe do you
Mhm.
have tools that you could recommend for maybe a small company, a medium-sized
Yeah.
company, and large?
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, it's funny you asked that because, so quick or long story short, I used to teach just a few courses at Conestoga for HR data analytics. And of course, I had some of my students ask me, they're like, okay, but like, what if we don't have a large company? Because these bigger HRIS systems, they're not cheap. They're millions of dollars sometimes the contract just to run them, right? Depending if you go, some could be in the six figures, some could be maybe lesser than that. However, if you have a company that's like, let's say less than 50 or 50 to 100, they don't have the money to be putting into these HR foundations, but that shouldn't stop and limit them because of it. So there is still a lot of like Excel analytics that you can do. And what's great also is if you have someone newer to the role, there's a lot of like courses on LinkedIn that can even give you just the basics of what to do, like kind of with Excel. However, the biggest thing out of all of this before anyone goes to even kind of look to start is what is the quality of your data? And that is the very, yeah, that is the very big thing that I always mention to my students or mention to my coworkers. Garbage in is what garbage is out.
Mm-hmm.
So if
Yeah.
you're putting in bad data, you're gonna have bad data that you're giving, and that's not accurate. So what you would have to start with is make sure that your data first is clean. Make sure that you're actually keeping up to date appropriately with hires, the hire date, um, and then
Um,
making sure that the confidentiality first. I know there's these little things that go into even thinking, as you can see where my mind goes before you can even offer stuff. You have to think about the
yeah.
confidentiality, how you're going to keep it confidential, the personal information, consent. But yeah, if you're starting with a smaller, you can definitely do so much analytics on Excel. You can actually make small dashboards on Excel, kind of using pivot tables with slicers. And in the slicers, it helps you to be able to dissect the kind of information and charts that you're making in Excel. So you can actually make nice looking analytics. If you have something that's more middle, like let's just say you have a few thousand employees, which is kind of crazy for me to say like a few thousand employees is middle, but I'm just so used to working with larger corporations. There is I wouldn't say lower end, but more basic HRIS systems.
Hmm.
And those ones kind of give you the capability to be able to gather and store your data. And then on addition of storing that data, it then has those features to be able to pull the data and analyze. And then when you have these bigger corporations, the big thing that happens is the system does all of it, data storage, analytics, as well as providing more visuals. So really it works its way up depending on what system you have, but you can definitely
Yeah,
see it.
a lot more manual to begin with, but
Oh,
also
yeah.
cheaper.
Oh, yeah, especially because like Excel, like you can get a Microsoft, I think, online package for what, under $200 for the year, right? And that gives
Yeah.
you access to like PowerPoint, Outlook, Excel, of course, and Word, and using a PowerPoint and Excel. You can start keeping your data in. That's something I actually was teaching in my analytics was how to use Power Pivot tables, being able to actually store and maintain your data and how to use that to actually make these custom dashboards. And they all can happen in Excel, which either is like a lot cheaper or some people still have access with their student and university accounts, or they can use like Excel or Microsoft products, so it could be free technically. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, that is excellent. Okay, another question to dive deep into your opinion and experience.
yeah,
Let's say we've got the tools now, we're up and running, we've cleaned our data,
yeah,
and we're ready to track some analytics here.
yeah,
If you had like let's say a top three um, data points or metrics that you think every company should be tracking, what would be your top three? If it's more
yeah,
than that, feel free. I know that's a tough and loaded question.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I guess like yeah, it all just depends on the type of analytic that you're wanting to look at and just the
Mm,
standpoint. But I guess I can kind of start with three big, I'll say, then I'll cheat a little bit, three big metric categories and how that can relate into some. So I would say that the three, just because of where we are right now, in the industry, is turnover, retirement, as well
mm,
as absenteeism.
okay.
So the reason why I'm saying those three is because obviously that deals a lot with people leaving and the potential of leaving.
Yeah.
And that is just more, I would say, relevant now if you're starting because you're probably wanting to find out at the beginning who are the people that are leaving this corporation or this company. And then you're probably going to look at the demographics after as to how people could like stay. But when looking at turnover, the big one is like voluntary turnover. How many people are we having that are leaving voluntary and not involuntary? And then you can start tracking, is that rate decreasing? What are we doing that is causing the rate to actually decrease? Or then you're looking at retirement because, like I said, the generations, we now actually see a shift. The Gen X generation, just because I'm so used to dealing with it, the oldest age a Generation X person can be right now is around 60 years old.
Oh
Yes.
wow, yeah.
So we're starting to see a shift where what was always the focus, and you probably heard me say it, like, oh, the baby boomer generation, um, the youngest that they have there is like 61. So clearly, if you're seeing how everyone's retiring there, the knowledge sharing and transferring is needed, important. However, we're starting to see Generation X people are now retiring. So it's almost like if you didn't hop on that baby boomer generation shifting to make sure we got their knowledge, you almost lost out. We're now like starting on next generation. And that's stuff that you would get from looking at just retirement. And then the last one was absenteeism, which you can probably see why that's huge. Are we having people take a lot of sick days? And it's trying to understand too, you're not looking at are they taking a lot of sick days as a negative, like, oh, we need to punish, right? Sometimes when you hear that,
Mm,
you're thinking, oh, are you trying to track me because you're trying? No, like, what can we do to make sure? What is happening? Is there too much stress? Are a lot of people going on stress leave? Is there stuff that we can do to help? Are we noticing that certain groups are taking more sick days? Is there something that can help with that? So yeah, I would say really absenteeism, retirement, and turnover. Those are three that aren't too hard kind of to start to with metrics,
Yeah.
just because you can find those numbers pretty easy within a company, but they have
Yeah.
one of the most like impact.
Absolutely. And even the financial impact of, you're about to
Yeah.
lose this knowledge from those retiring. And you're also needing to hire. And,
Yes.
having an
Yeah.
understanding of those gaps is really important financially.
Well, yeah. And if you're seeing that the younger generation, like the Gen Zs, if their turnover is high, because I'm not making any statements towards the Gen Z population as I'm a millennial. Um, but sometimes they don't maybe want to stay as long in certain roles. So if you're having a higher population coming in that aren't wanting to stay as long, and the people that have 25 plus years experience are now leaving, well, this is causing a huge gap. And then you need to start looking at the engagement and the absenteeism for these millennials, as well as the Gen X, because they're taking on the brunt of maybe those younger leaving and those older that are leaving, right?
Right.
So there's so many different trends and stuff to look at, like when certain different things has turnover or not. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
where yeah, there's so many different stories that you can find.
And that's the thing too, because it also calls into question, well, maybe our workplace is more geared towards the baby boomer Gen X generation, and
Yeah,
maybe Gen Z wants more remote work, or, what is
yeah.
it that we can do to attract them and keep them?
Yeah, and I remember like I've read like different articles too on LinkedIn where they said some, and I'm not putting it for all the Gen Z, but they say some of them care more instead of just about money. They're caring about what are in the benefits. Am I having it that I have a lot of better like mental health kind of coverage? Are we doing more company culture, like hanging out or being able to see people? Like there's a lot of different stuff that we thought 10 years ago, right? Like 10, 15 years ago, you stayed at a job for 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
You didn't hop around. That's not like that's not really what happened. And as long as you had a salary, you were there, you clocked in, you clocked out. But what we're seeing is such a huge shift of that's not really what's needed now. And people, as much as they love stability, they're hopping in these tech jobs where they don't know if they're going to be there for a year or 2 years, or if this tech company is going to flourish or crash, right? They're willing to do it because they like these kind of different perks that you're
Yeah.
getting that's outside the box of just salary.
Yeah, it's so true. It's such a different trend that's
Oh yeah.
happening. And so interesting that by generation we can take a look at what the values are. And this is one of the things I talk
Mhm.
about in engagement economics, just looking at the
Yeah.
different values. Like in one generation, like you mentioned, wants the stability, whereas others want some
Yeah.
flexibility. Gen Z, we're seeing the mental health and the perks.
Yeah.
Definitely something that can be supported by analytics.
Well, and exactly. And I think that's the whole thing too. Anytime you kind of, and this goes to where I love my science background comes in. If you're ever making an experiment, you had your hypothesis. Your hypothesis, this is where I'm going to go into my little science thing. You
I
had your
love it.
hypothesis, and where it's what you kind of are predicting. Like, this is my thing that maybe Gen Z are wanting more flexibility. And then you kind of go into your protocol. Okay, so what am I going to do for collection? How am I going to analyze this? What kind of results do we believe will meet a threshold that, yes, this I agree to this, or no, null hypothesis, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And then documenting how you're doing it and then actually collect it and present it. So that's something I kind of taught my classes. Like, you have to think of it kind of like an experiment, really. We're all asking these different questions, and people think they know what is happening, but then half the time we'll get the data back and say, oh, we were completely wrong. Maybe they did
Wow.
just want that, right? Like, I think that's the thing. We all make assumptions and we think that the assumptions are correct, but it's this data that's like, here's the science, here's the numbers, yes or no, this is matching what you're saying. So it's kind of cool to be able to have this type of information that kind of backs up what we're trying to tell.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the real
Yeah.
story. We've got a story in our
Yeah.
heads, but what's the real story? What's really going
Yeah.
on here?
Well, because there's so many outside sources and factors that we see on the news, social media, what we're seeing on LinkedIn, you know what I mean? And it's like, oh yeah, that's right, that's right. And it's like, no, okay, we need to actually go back to the humans that we're looking at. let's take out all of this external and outside noise and
Oh
think,
yeah.
what is happening?
Oh yeah. And speaking of humans, because there's a lot of talk about AI, right? AI
Uh,
versus humans, right? Here we go.
oh yeah, here we go.
So in your line of work, where has AI come in, and where do you see it going? Do you think there's, you know, I'm hearing a lot about AI fatigue as well.
Yeah,
We're talking about AI all the time. But
yeah.
in a position where it's analytics, like what is that perspective from you?
Every year, if not month, AI is changing something. So I think that's one thing to like think about is that might have a different opinion depending on when you were looking at it. But when I was teaching just a couple of years ago, I had students coming up to me saying, Lynsey, I've had people tell me like HR is like in data analytics, there's not going to be a job for me. AI is going to take it over. Like, why am I bothering to study it? And the one thing I would always say back to them, and there actually is articles, which if you needed me to send it to you, um, that's not the case. Whereas some might say it's the case, it's that with HR, the AI is just helping to go and actually make it easier what is happening. So you can build something, but if you don't have someone that actually understands how something works, or just really being able to feed it, you can't just trust on AI. We know that AI is not always right. You know what I mean? Like if you go to
Mhm.
ChatGPT, which like I say, as a teacher, when I'm getting my response and people are accidentally leaving in, would you like me to adapt this question? I'm
Oh
like, okay.
no.
I'm like, oh no, you dropped the bag on that one. Um,
Definitely.
so like you can tell it's not always correct, but you need to have people that have that actual knowledge and understanding of what you're doing so that they can see, okay, if some of AI is being used to help shape something, is it actually correct? Is it not? Because for all you know, you could be giving completely wrong information. And that kind of goes with analytics also. Um, you can definitely like I know people that will put stuff in to help summarize or gather the data quicker, or if you're looking at averages or maybe different statistics, then use it to help summarize those kind of basic analytics really quickly. And it's useful and it's helping take away kind of the stuff that would have maybe taken a week long to do. And yeah, the companies, the HRIS systems, the big thing is so Workday, for example, one of the HRIS systems that I work with, they're having the AI chatbot, the AI help where it's okay, if you have an issue, it helps create the answers right away. That's actually when I was in more of an operational role. It was handy in the sense that when we may have been getting tied down with hundreds of emails asking very simplistic questions and we couldn't actually help our users, that chatbot can help, especially if the answers are very, where do I go to find my vacation? Where do I go to find my payroll? Right? That's stuff that it's okay that AI is helping. It's okay. It's not taking over our jobs, but we're just having more time to actually work on meaningful information. And that's like with analytics. If it's helping to do some of, let's just say, the basic calculations, it's helping so that you have the time to actually analyze the data.
I heard a phrase that like it helps you reduce digital chores.
Yes, yes, I
And like,
absolutely ag agree with that.
right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Sorry, I
it's just,
didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm like, that's
no,
exactly
you're
what
good.
the digital chores are. Like where's my payroll?
It's
Where's
exactly, and it's almost like a exhaustion fatigue that you get from just answering. And it's not that these questions are minimal, but they're questions that you need to answer as a part of your job. And you want to make sure that the user on the other end has the best experience. But you want to think above, right? Instead of just always being reactive and doing what's now, you want to be proactive. What are the stuff that we can have that AI can help right now? So I'm already thinking ahead. I'm already thinking of
mm,
forecasting. I'm already thinking of future metrics that are going to be needed at my company and not so tied down with maybe more um, simpler tasks. So I think it's definitely something where it's useful. I don't think it ever and shouldn't ever fully take over the job because, like I said, you still need the people to have the fundamental base of understanding what it's providing. But then again, if I've talked to people, they say, okay, well, our jobs are going to be gone in 5 years. So, like, I think it just depends who you talk to.
yeah, right. There's
Yeah.
definitely that looming, what's gonna happen
Oh,
next. And if anyone's seen iRobot with Will Smith,
oh
we're all like, oh
yeah.
my
Oh,
God.
yeah. Yeah,
You know, that,
definitely is like, yes, is it going to be overtaking with it all? But just, yeah, one thing, it's a quick article that actually that I'd read about just 2 years ago. It was showing a percentage of leaders, and the leadership it was saying is that if they weren't actually adapting and open to learning AI and how to use it, that there was a higher chance of them actually not like doing well for the company. Because those that were going against trying to use AI, they're behind. They're already not progressing ahead. It's those that are starting to use, and instead of just being so upfront and saying, "Oh, I don't want to use it," allowing it to like happen and allowing it to actually make stuff easier for you, they're noticing that those leaders and those companies are doing better, right? So,
wow. Okay, now there are
yeah,
analytics on leaders when it comes
there's
to
analytics
AI.
on leaders on AI.
Wow. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
we're at that day of age now.
Literally. Wow. Okay, so in the past, when I've had guests on here, we talk a lot about leadership.
Yeah,
And, this is an interesting perspective that we're taking with you
yeah,
when it comes to analytics. And so, one of the questions I often ask is, what characteristics do you think leaders need to have? And
yeah,
one would be AI literacy, but from your
yeah.
perspective, what else do you think makes leaders successful?
Not just having the knowledge, of course, right? When you have the knowledge with leadership, you have people that look up to you and can understand. I have respect for that. But one of the biggest feelings I have is having a characteristic of empathy. And empathy is one of the biggest ones for me because this is kind of how I talk about with HR. We try and put people as numbers instead of the human. So I kind of say, like, I try to look at the human approach of actually putting human back at HR. And a lot of that is actually being able to connect with one another. So when you have leaders, if they're only ever seeing people as just numbers, or if they're being kind of cold to ones, not having that empathy to grow that like loyalty and connection to who you're working with, it can really make it a very make or break or toxic kind of situation. I find that I know even like when I am connecting, when it was with my students or when I was connecting to coworkers, being able to be empathetic as to what they're dealing with, but also still providing that professionalism and that kind of leadership role. It's a balance that's hard to do, but it's needed. You don't just get respect. You have to be able to work to actually earn that respect. And a lot of ways to earn that respect is by being able to understand the person that you're talking with and being open and kind of vulnerable at times and empathetic. So I think that's what characteristics is. Someone might say, oh, a leader needs to be powerful and in charge, where I kind of look at it as a different approach of more show that kind of kindness, show that kind of tenderness, that empathy that towards people, because that to me is what gives you respect. And that's where I've been lucky, where I do have people that I connect with a lot. And they say it's because I will sit down and say, let's have a coffee chat. Let's not do this over email. Let's connect. What are you feeling? How is your day? Start off the conversation. And instead of me going into like a role where I'm telling someone stuff to do, I say, okay, how are you? Right? So it's simple little things like that to show like you actually care about the person. They're not just a number. So yeah.
You're a leader in so many different facets. You are, with your students at Conestoga, with your colleagues at work, and also, showing up as that thought leader online. So much leadership experience in so many different ways. But is there a challenge in particular that you faced that you learned a lesson from?
Yeah. I would say one of the biggest things that is still something I continue to work on is being able to have a communication that works with the different type of personalities that you have. And I feel like that as a leader, it should be something that you're still always growing towards. And it's big because you don't have a one personality fits all when you talk with someone. And how their personality is actually shapes more than just who they are. It's actually a lot to do with their work style and how they actually understand. And we had recently did this one type of, it's kind of like a personality test mixed with how it shows you as a color. I don't know if you've ever done it, but it has to do with showing like blue, red, yellow, and green and kind of
Green.
where you are, yes, on it. And mine, funny enough, was very red actually
Yeah,
for
I
direct.
knew it.
Yeah, I know. You would think it would be more like if you were like, oh, the blue analytics. That was my second color that was driving, but mine fiery red.
Yeah.
is what they call it, which I kind of laugh because my last name is Redman. So I'm like, of course it's fiery red.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, but with that, I was able to learn a lot more about my communication style. And it was very, very on point of I can be very quick and make my judgments very quick. I appreciate when people just kind of get to the point. I'm not a fan of when people have to repeat themselves, right? Because I'm like, are you paying attention? So that can come off as very aggressive to some, which is what I
Mhm.
learned from it. And also what I learned is what is the best way for me to actually approach others? And that was my biggest learning is the communication isn't always the same. I'd rather, for example, talk, you just tell me what you want, and that's great. Whereas if someone has more of an analytical one, they were saying what the personality type is, when you talk with them, don't just talk directly at them. Let them be able to take that information, take it away. They need to analyze it. And once they analyze and understand it themselves, then they'll be more in line to agree with you as a leader, right? Or if someone's more on the emotional one, they were saying you need to build that rapport. You need to be able to show that you're respecting them, that you have comfort with them. And once they trust you, they're going to actually want to help you and follow you more. And that, I think, makes you a better leader. So I think with me, the biggest hardship is understanding there is different communication pathways. And just because I believe one way is better with like my red personality, that's not always the case, and you need to be adaptable. And if not, like I've been in ones where it almost turns into not a shouting match, but you don't get anywhere. You talk for 1 hour, and then you're like, where did we get? Like, oh, we're
Yeah.
right in the middle. It's like a tug of war. So it's being able to understand how can we have it that we actually move the needle ahead instead of like backwards. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's always the hardest thing. And I will, everyone will keep growing, right? Like it's never, if you mastered it, amazing. Whoever did that, like congrats. But
Exactly. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the color personalities because I think,
did you do it?
yeah, so that, yeah. And I'm also like I straddle between red and green, which I find
Green.
is really
Okay, I could
interesting.
see that. I could see. Well, you
Yeah.
have a very like you connect well. You know, well, the fact that you're doing a podcast, like you connect very well, and I find green has that. They say like that nurturing kind of like presence.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so interesting because that's something I've done in one of my trainings. I have some
Oh
communication
yeah,
training as well. And it's so valuable. People are always like, wow, that is absolutely totally me. And
yeah,
I love assessments like that. I really find that it's valuable in building the self-awareness to then figure out, okay, how do I connect with someone who's, a green or a red or a yellow, whatever it is. And you're right,
hmm
it's something that's takes ongoing practice and stepping outside of our own frame of reference
yeah, which
constantly.
is hard, right?
Oh yeah,
Stepping outside of what, because sometimes you just get so into your world. It's like, no, I need to take a look at the bigger picture and think. It's not just me here. Like, what is everyone else's? And I feel like that kind of goes back to the whole as a leader being like empathetic and being able to open is that it's not just always about you. You have to make sure that you're having other people's feedback and input.
exactly, exactly. Now, building off of that and being able to
Yeah,
understand how other people are feeling, so we always talk about engagement on this podcast and
yeah,
strategies for engagement. Now,
love
for
that.
someone coming from an analytics background, what would be your top strategies or what have you seen that's done well based on the analytics for engagement?
Um, I think the big ones, and it's kind of funny you say that because I was also helping briefly on the side. Two different engagement surveys I've actually helped with from my old place that I worked at and the new one. And obviously I know the analytical side behind it, but when coming from engagement point of view now, what I think kind of helps people feel more enabled towards it is that you're getting people more engaged by showing that you're caring and that you're opening up and show that what they tell you, the biggest thing that I saw with engaging is that you need to show that the person you're talking to, that you're actually listening. And I know that sounds very kind of basic to say, but you can throw out these engagement surveys all you want and people give a response. But if you're not actually showing that you're engaging with them, you're taking what they're saying and making an actual strategy to make it better, you're starting to like disengage, have people disassociate because then they're no longer really caring about the organization. They're starting to kind of clock out because they're thinking, well, who am I as a person in this company? Right? They're not fully like caring. And I think that's something where having a leader that also is asking for feedback from them, asking for ways that they can make things better. Another engagement is, like I said, I prefer doing coffee chats. So it's really trying to have it that the person that I'm talking with, how can I connect with them on just different levels that aren't just, like I said, over email. Let's
Yeah.
have a chat over video and just say, like, now that we're in this world of digital virtual, let's have a coffee and chat this out. A lot of the things with analytics, for engaging others is they'll just get so lost with all the emails that they think, I don't know, like, really where to go from here. But then when you say, let's just hop on a call, let's just talk it out, they're like, oh, I feel so much better because I was able to describe it more, or they were able to learn a lot more from it. So I don't know. I think a lot of it has to do with, instead of just having engagement with like big, huge grand gestures, it's as simple as just having that connection and that building that rapport and that trust from them. And that kind of helps them to open up a bit more, which kind of in the end helps with engagement.
I absolutely agree. And it's building that connection where, we know that people are going to disagree on things or have different perspectives on
Absolutely.
everything. But if you can connect with them and just be able to understand their perspective, sometimes that's enough.
Yeah,
That's enough.
it just be understood. And that's kind of where you can have like a mixed emotion when it comes to like when you actually give out engagement surveys, because people, there's always normally a question they put on is, what is your feeling, or like what percentage agree, somewhat disagree, looking on the Likert scale of how do you feel that we responded as leaders from the last survey? That's like a really common one that are on there. And that to me is one of the most kind of
Mhm.
prevailing as to how engaged your employees are, even though these engagement surveys, they give you your engagement and your enablement, if you're enabled to be able to actually do your job versus your engagement as to how well you're actually wanting to do it, um, is if you're actually following up on it. Because if I'm just going to keep giving you surveys and we're not doing anything that is helping with those issues that are coming to light, your engagement's going to go right down. You might be happy with your team, but if as a corporation or company, you're not really caring to make those changes that they're saying, they're gonna they're gonna clock out. They're not gonna be engaged. So yeah,
Absolutely. Right. And sometimes it's more about, okay, after doing this engagement survey, we've deduced that our company engagement is 71 and industry
yeah,
standard is 70. So we're better than industry standard. So we're good.
yeah, yeah, and exactly. It's just like, we beat it. You know what? Everything is fine. There's nothing wrong in the world. It's okay. It's like, no, like there still tells a story. Like obviously you'll never get 100%. If you get 100%, like, again, that's me saying congrats. Um, but it should always be looked at as, we didn't just meet kind of the industry standard. How can we have it that we're still trying to increase it? Because in the end, we want everyone to feel engaged, right? Understanding not everyone will be, but really our goal should be, okay, we have a high number, but how can we make it higher? And I think that's what kind of differentiates between a leader that's there to work and a true, like, empowering leader. And that's kind of like what I see with leadership and empowerment, is that you don't just go for the baseline and you just don't want to have, like, I'm okay with it being standard. No, how can we make it higher? How can we make that impact on our actual employees? And it's that that's going to take the company further with that engagement, are the ones that, no, we are going to take it serious as to what you're still saying, because let's make it so that everyone's engaged, not just a certain percentage.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. The time has been flying by, which is
Yeah,
this. We need a podcast number two. I would love to know a piece of advice. It could be about analytics, it could be about leadership. I will leave that in your court. But a piece of advice that you would offer to someone, starting off in leadership or starting off their careers or in this industry.
being able to ask for help is not a weakness. That honestly goes to show, for me, that you care about what you're doing and that you're connecting with the person. Like I said, even as a leader, when I've had top leadership, and I mean like the very top, ask me about something and say, oh, what is your thoughts on this? Or is there something that you can maybe suggest? And like, that just made me feel appreciated because they thought highly enough of me to help them. So I think even in starting at even the lowest of the career is always being open and having those connections, being personable, that you're being empathetic towards other people. That's going to go a lot further than siloing yourself. That's what helped me is being in and helping my teammates, being a team member, a team leader, knowing what I was doing and empathetic. I know I say empathy all the time, but being kind, honestly.
Yeah, it's the simple
It's
things,
so
and it
cheesy. I know it's so cheesy, but I if you ask your no, it's so like I guess especially in the HR world where everyone just thinks HR is very like hard and mean. It's just no, mine always just grew from just being open to those of your teammates. They'll be open to you and you'll get a lot of work done because you care as a team.
yeah,
You want to help them. You want your team to grow. Don't just think of yourself as the individual growing. Think of your whole team growing because if they're not growing too, you're gonna have a hard time.
yeah, I love that. And there's that saying where you can go further together you can go faster alone, but you can go further together, which I love.
Absolutely. Like, yeah, being as a team, which is a hard thing to think of, you need to all grow together as a team, or else it's going to be what do you call it, a sinking ship. So
Exactly.
changing that mindset of not always just being, it's me, me, me. It's what can we do
What can
together? Yeah.
yeah, love that. Well, Lynsey, I have one final question for you. I really thank you for joining us on the podcast today, but
Yeah.
we also want to know, what are you driven by?
I think my driven, I'm very driven by empowerment and enabling and allowing others to be empowered themselves. My kind of internal, intrinsic reward that I feel is when I know that others are doing well and that they say, like, thanks, this helped me out so much. Not just empowering myself, but knowing that other people are now feeling better about themselves or empowered to go make their own decisions. If they go to a different company, they're now empowering those other people around them and they're doing it in like a more healthy, positive way, and then I've gotten feedback on it. That to me is what drives me, right? Helping those other people and making sure that they see that they can do it themselves. So that's what drives me, honestly.
I love that answer. And I think it's so true. Like I see how you lift other people up online, you're plugging people where they need to be. You're all about
Making
that.
connections for people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, a
Absolutely.
catalyst. That's what I've been called, a catalyst, actually. Because like
Ah,
with friends, I have a lot of different friend groups, but we joke I'm a catalyst because I'll call my friends and have them become friends with each other. I'm like, you guys have good personalities. You guys connect with each other. And I'm just like, I feel like that's kind of what helped. And then like with the empowerment of others, I'm being a catalyst for some. I'm like, you're gonna do well. You're gonna grow great. Even with my students, they'll
yeah.
message me saying, hey, I got this amazing job and I was going over the different analytics that you taught me. And when I took that extra time to show them how to do great interview techniques, they're like, that helped me get the job. That was outside my scope of teaching, but it's because I really wanted them to do well. So it's
Wow.
being able to give those little extra things of making them feel empowered. So yeah, I'll be that catalyst for people, especially on networks.
I love that. Wow. Lynsey, this has been amazing. I cannot thank you enough for sharing your insight, your expertise, your advice, and a little bit more about you and being vulnerable on this podcast. So, if
Yeah.
people want to get connected with you, the catalyst, that red, fiery
Yeah,
personality,
where
where
can
do
we
they
connect
go?
them? Yeah, you can definitely drop it in there, but probably best is with LinkedIn because of course, this HR network and how everything happens with it. I try to have it that my LinkedIn is either giving articles and different stuff that I'm researching, different cool this might sound nerdy to people, but different HRIS systems or stuff that's happening with trends. Yeah, just connect with me on LinkedIn. Would love to have these kind of conversations. It's obviously just my name altogether, but yeah, you can just drop it in wherever and yeah, probably your best way to connect.
Excellent. Please do connect with Lynsey, an incredible resource, an incredible leader. So be sure to get connected into her network. And for Lynsey, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. I really learned a lot. I loved having this conversation. I loved communicating with you. And I hope that our listeners enjoyed it as well. So for those
Same.
listening, thank you so much for tuning in to the What Are You Driven By podcast. We hope that you'll join us next time for another incredible leadership story. So make sure you subscribe and connect with us online at Driven by Co. Stay engaged, and we'll see you next time.